Today, let's make a super easy tank top. Welcome, I do sewing and DIY related content, and today I'm using the Simplicity pattern. It was 94.81 to make a tank top. Now, I've actually made this pattern before for an actual shirt, but I had this really fun Halloween fabric and I thought it'd be cute to make it as a tank top that then I could wear to work with like a cardigan over top. So for the first step for this, all we're going to be doing is actually adding darts in place. So the pattern does show you where to line up these darts. I have a whole video on how to add darts in case you're interested, but this is a really simple way to add a little bit more structure and shape to the blouse. This tank top pattern is one of the easiest ones that you're going to see, so there really isn't a lot of shape given, and that's kind of where the darts come in, just to provide a little bit more. So now we're just going to take this over to my sewing machine and sew each dart in place. One of my tips for darts is, especially when you're like in the fabric itself, I don't backstitch, that way it's not too bulky, but then I'm just going to knot off the ends of the thread. And then I repeated this for the darts on either side. Next, we're going to be using the middle back. So I did serge this before I did any stitching, so you can see here. Now I have matched with right sides together the two back pieces, and then there's a big dot that you're going to be sewing up to. So I have that pinned, and I'm just going to go through and match everything. Now I actually didn't have enough fabric to make this one continuous piece, so you can see at the bottom that the back piece is actually two pieces that I sewed together. If you have enough fabric, you won't need to do that. I just really wanted to use this fabric and I was just a little short, so I just sewed this together so that it's like two panels coming together to give it that unique look. And then we're just taking one long seam to sew the back together. Now at the very top of it, we are going to have to do a little extra stitching, so for that we will kind of deal with that at a later step. So here's currently what the back of my shirt looks like. As I mentioned, the very top of the back is slightly opened, so we're going to leave it like that. So now I'm going to be matching the front piece of the shirt with the back piece of the shirt at the shoulder seams and then pinning these in place. And I'll repeat this for both sides of the shoulder. So now I'm just going to go through and take that seam across the top. And then once I take the seam, I'm just going to go through and use my serger to clean it up. You could definitely use a zigzag stitch or an overcast stitch on your sewing machine. So now it's time for us to add that little loop at the top. So like I said, on the back it is slightly opened. Now the pattern has you do it with like a piece of elastic. I really like this one method though, where you create a very small little fabric loop. So I'm just going to do that. I have my little rectangle here, and I'm just making a seam along the side, and I feel like this gives it a really nice touch as well. Sometimes the elastic I found could be a little difficult, where this fabric loop I found it easier to work with, and I'll include a link to another pattern that kind of walks you through step by step in case you were more interested in this method. But you could definitely use the elastic too. I have done that before for another shirt. I just didn't have a great color of elastic to do that with. I only had white on hand, and I really wanted this shirt to really have the same cohesive overall look. So I just went through, took that stitch along the side, and then once I had that done, I had to turn this right side out. Now it is a very tiny little loop, so I used the safety pin method just to push all of the fabric through and turn it right side out. Once I had it turned right side out though, I finger pressed it so that it would be nice and flat and smooth, adjusted anything that was needed to be, but now it's ready to be used in our blouse. So here is the back of my shirt. As I mentioned at the top, we have that little opening, which is what we are supposed to do. So what we want to do is we want to fold over this so that we're folding it over basically in half and then folding it again to create a little closed loop so that we do not see any of those raw edges. Then I'm going to be taking my fabric, folding this also over so that we have a spot for a button to go through, and then just pinning it in place. And I'll have a better angle for this just so that you're able to see it. So you can see on both sides they are folded over, and then I have that fabric loop just so that it is kind of nicely into that little edge that's cleaned up, and then we're just going to be sewing that directly in place. So I'm just going to go over to my sewing machine and sew both of these, so it's just a straight stitch. I did find that I did backstitch at the beginning and end for both of these, and then I just very carefully moved it through. I did pull that serger thread just to help kind of guide that fabric through my machine, as it was having a little bit of an issue. But once I got done with the left side, I then just repeated this for the right hand side. So here is what that nice little closure at the top looks like. It's really neat. You don't see any raw edges and everything comes together really nicely. So with this done, we can now move on to the side seams for our shirt. So I have one in place and then I did the other side as well. So that was just matching with right sides together. We're going to just sew both of these sides closed, and then we'll basically have the makings of a tank top, which, as you can tell, this was a very quick and easy item to put together. Once I did the sewing, I then just went through and serged all of this too. So as I mentioned, we now have a tank top. Of course, we do need to do some edge finishing still on the armholes, the neck, and then the hem at the bottom. But everything does come together really quickly with this, which is one of the reasons why I like this pattern so much, is that it's very fast and it's also very versatile. So now for all of the openings for the armholes as well as the neck, the way that the pattern has you do this is using bias tape or binding. So I did make my own because I really wanted it to match the fabric, but you can also get these in stores. This is single fold bias tape. What you're doing with this is opening it all the way up and then matching with right sides together the edge of the bias tape with the edge of your neckline as well as your armholes. So I'm just going through pinning all of this in place, and then we will just be taking a seam all the way around. When you get to the edges, I do fold them over just so that it creates a really nice clean look. But as you can see, everything is just laying nicely on there. And then I did the exact same thing for the armhole, being sure that I folded it correctly. And the pattern does give you more information on that. So it does walk you through step by step of how you would add the bias binding. So now with the first step done, it is now time for us to complete this. So I'm going to be folding my bias tape back how it was originally folded, and then fold everything over again. And now we can see that we've enclosed that raw edge. And then I'm just going to take a clip and clip this in place. And I will repeat this all the way around. So I do this for the neck as well as the armholes. And this is just a really easy way to give those nice openings a clean look. From the outside, you do not see any raw edges. From the inside, you don't see any raw edges. So I'm just going to go through and sew this up. Now in the pattern itself, it says to sew it from the front. I find that I really like to sew this from the back, and then I'm just very cautious about making sure I use the exact same seam allowance all the way through. So just using best sewing techniques, and this gives it a really nice and clean look. The pattern itself also does talk about doing some understitching. I have done it both ways, where I did the understitching and I did not, and they both turned out exactly the same. So that's really more up to you. And then I am repeating all of these steps for the armhole. So you can see I'm just going through, taking that seam to sew the bias binding in place, and then doing the sewing to actually sew everything closed so that the edges are nice and encased within that binding. So now it is time for the last stitch using our sewing machine, and that's the hem at the bottom. I like a bigger hem, so I did take a 1-inch hem through here. So for this, I folded my fabric about 1/4 of an inch, and then I folded it 1 inch, and then I'm just taking a 1-inch seam allowance all the way through. So this just gives it a really big look. I'm very careful the entire time to do the same size seam allowance. And then at this point, the shirt is basically complete besides one little button on the back. So I'm just going to hand stitch this in place, and now the shirt is all done. So my final thoughts on this project, it is such a fast and easy shirt to do. Everything comes together really, really nicely. Do make sure you are doing edge finishing though on the inside where we are not using any binding. So whether that's using an overcast stitch, whether that's using a zigzag stitch, you just want to be sure that those edges are being finished. Everything looks really good though. You can see how I kind of put those two pieces together. You can't tell on the back. And I think that this is a really fun and easy way to just quickly throw together a tank top. I also love that this came part of that overall pattern where you do get some shirts and then you can have a tank top pattern too. So here's what it looks like. I think this is a really fun, like casual look that I can do with the cardigan, especially for the upcoming Halloween season. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe and let me know what you want to see next. Thanks for watching.